In this video, I'm going to give you 3 projects that recruiters just absolutely love, and it will take you from being seen as a candidate to being shortlisted. These 3 projects right here are going to take your portfolio game to the next level. So let's go take a look. So if your portfolio looks like every other junior developer's well, it's not going to get shortlisted, but if it's got projects on there, most importantly, that are just Spotify clone projects or clone projects that you basically get from YouTube videos. You know, those really long ones that are 3 hours long and it's like, build a clone of this app or this app. Yeah, those ones hiring managers are not interested in. Calculator apps, basic projects, to-do lists, things like that. Hiring managers are not interested in seeing this because this doesn't really reflect what they're hiring you to do. What they're hiring you to do is the 3 projects I'm going to teach you about. And what it really does is these 3 projects really map out what real company problems are, real considerations they have, and real needs that they have. And very briefly, I'll tell you what they are. So one is a live presence system. So it tells you when someone's online, when something's active, when something's inactive. It could be a person, it could be a vehicle, it could be anything. And this is really good for analytical dashboards for very, very large companies like Amazon, Walmart, large bus networks, things like that. Another one which ties off nicely from that is an analytical dashboard. So something where you obviously log in, you get secret access to it, and it gives you everything in a dashboard with analytics like charts and things like that, graphs, numbers. It gives you information on users, usage, all that good stuff that surprisingly makes up a big bulk of front-end development work. So that's project number 2. And 3 is production grade authentication. So when we say production grade, we're talking about every single flow. We're not just talking about a username, password field, click submit, you go to like a hidden page. This is literally the full thing. Every single flow, forget password, magic link, change password, edit your profile, change your email address, confirm that you've changed, so many things. And I'll show you the exact stack, schemas and features so you can build them in a week, a weekend, a couple weeks each. Now, very importantly, a lot of these projects are going to have very similar technologies, and we're going to talk about them very quickly now. So we have that as a core concept out of the way, and these are the things that you really need to learn to be able to build these projects or use these projects, which is what I used to do, to learn these technologies, which is also a great way of learning. You pick some technologies and then you just come up with a project idea and you use that project to learn these skills. But what are those skills? Well, end game stuff that you need to know as a front-end developer when you're putting your portfolio out there is stuff like this. So Next.js 14 or 15 or whichever version is relevant right now, usually as long as it's got the app router in, that'll be fine. We want to consider things like server actions, route handlers, parallel routes, things like that which are important for modern Next.js development. The other one is TypeScript. It comes as no surprise that that's up on that list. Most modern large systems in front-end development require TypeScript. So end-to-end type safety, and it just means safer refactors as well. Another one, and this is just personal taste, I personally prefer Supabase for a real-time NoSQL database, and it uses Postgres, it has auth, it has real-time data handling and data streaming, it has RLS policies and edge functions, which all of that probably sounds like gobbledygook to you, but if you're someone who wants to build really cool projects, if you want to look into get into full stack development, this is like the easiest way to get into it. Like, they've made it so simple. Like, the way I've made it sounds way more complicated, but honestly, with just a few articles or even just a prompt from ChatGPT, you'll really understand this very fast. It's so intuitive. Now, the next one is Vercel. It works so well with Next.js because it's made by the same company. And it just means you're hosted faster, more performantly, and it's free. It works well with domains. It works really well with Supabase. And that's a big combo that I use and to great success. And for your projects, this is a great way to host your stuff, to preview deployments and use it for edge and runtime stuff. UI, well, I would suggest, because you're in that early stage of development, that you focus on SaaS. If you feel like, and I say SaaS, so SCSS, which is basically making sure that you still understand, styling CSS, because the other option is Tailwind CSS. And Tailwind CSS is great if you really know CSS, but I would imagine if you're in the first 4 to 6 months of learning or in the first year, you probably don't know CSS to the level that you're able to use Tailwind CSS effectively. Now, as a senior developer, I would not advise any junior developer to pick up Tailwind CSS within the first year, other than just to know what it is, to have a little play around with it, but I would not be employing it because there is so much to CSS. CSS is so deep. You should be spending time learning CSS until maybe 2 to 3 years, probably 2 years, probably at most 2 years, and then jump into Tailwind CSS. But it's good to know what Tailwind CSS is, but don't use it all the time because you will not understand what you're doing. Now, the next part of the UI is that you should know Shad and CN, something like that, Radix, and basically be able to use component libraries at this stage. Now, those two are a little bit more complicated, but they work really well with Next.js, even Tailwind CSS if you do end up using it. But we need to start using component libraries more. We need to show that we can use them, because a lot of companies, they use Shadon, they use Radix, they use MUI, they use Kendo, they use Daisy UI. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of popular ones out there. Chakra. So you need to start getting into the habit of using component libraries and understanding how they work, because you can have pride in building every component by yourself, but at the end of the day, you need to get into the habit of building within design systems like these component libraries that I'm showing you here. The next one is charts. So you need to get good at using charts. So something like Recharts or Charts.js is great here. So another one to add to your skills. In terms of developer experience, so DX, I would suggest something like ESLint, super important. This is how most teams put their practices into rules, and it means that the coding format is kept within this rule set. So it's good to probably start adding it to your own personal projects. There's basic presets you can add. Prettier obviously just makes your whole code a certain standard. Husky basically, before you commit something, does a bunch of checks. And lint staging, so before you push it up, it checks that essentially your code is up to snuff. The last part is something that if you are dealing with very deeply nested objects, so you get an object and you get an object within an object within an object, those are probably deeply nested objects. If you're using TypeScript, you probably want to use Zod to help deeply type those types. Now, Zod is very, very endgame stuff. It's probably mid-level stuff, but it's good to be aware of it, because if you have a conversation in an interview and you know what Zod is to at least even a basic level, that'll help your chances massively. And if you list it as a skill and you do know how to use it, don't just list it if you don't know how, because there's nothing more embarrassing than listing loads of technologies and then you get asked about it in an interview and you have no idea what it is, because hiring managers will pick stuff up like that, like, oh, you've picked something really complicated like Zod. Well, it's not really complicated, but you've picked something like Zod. Do you actually know about it? And chances are most junior developers don't know about it. But you will be different. If you want to get into deeply nested objects in TypeScript, then learn Zod. But otherwise, it's an optional one. You don't have to have it on your list, but I want to put it on your radar. Because we're setting you aside from other junior developers, you are not going to be just a regular junior developer after watching this video. Now, why this stack? Why this particular stack that I've just listed here? It is essentially the same primitives and technologies and frameworks that you are going to be using in a real job as a Next.js or React developer, realistically. These are the database schemas, authentication flows, metrics and pipelines that you will be using in your job to do live updates and access control for all the different aspects of what makes up a website. So whether it's, there's so many other things we could have gone into. We could have gone into translations, we could have gone into other things, but I think for a portfolio project for a junior developer, this is a great place to start. And there's so many common themes in here, such as Next.js, TypeScript, and all the UI stuff we spoke about, and the developer experience stuff we spoke about, like ESLint and Prettier. These are things that are super common that you will get told about in your first few weeks as a junior developer. So it's better to be somewhat aware of it, and it's also good to demonstrate that you've been using it and you know what they are. But there we go, that's the stack. So let's jump into the first project. So what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to talk you through what these projects are. And really, you shouldn't be at this stage following projects on Rails. So what I mean is you watch a YouTube video and it tells you exactly how to do it. What you should be doing is getting a good idea of how to build it and then going out and building it yourself, because that's where the real learning comes in. And that's where you actually have the pride to be able to build something yourself and go and talk about it in an interview, because that is a really underrepresented skill, to be able to talk about technology in your interview, how to talk about your projects in detail. Because oftentimes when I'm interviewing for mid-level senior developers or junior developers, I can tell who doesn't build their projects in detail because they just can't talk about it. Their knowledge of their own project falls apart just after a very small amount of scrutiny. You don't want to be that person. So let's have a look at this online presence indicator, and gives you real-time status. So already you kind of get an idea of what we're talking about. It tells you, I mean, if we look at this, I think this is Discord. You get this Discord UI, has these green little buttons here, these circles, which says if someone's online, offline, if they're on standby, if they're on their mobile phone, if, you know, there's so many little real-time indicators that they pop up as, you know, data changes or a state changes, and it's always listening out for it. Rather than just manually changing it here by manually setting it, it automatically does it by listening out. Again, like here, like Discord. Discord's a great example of this, but, you know, things like Twitch, things like Steam, you know, Steam Friends, or just, you know, Facebook when someone's online in the messaging system, or WhatsApp or something. These all have real-time presence systems, and they're incredibly useful for tracking vehicles. If you're doing work on UI for a depot, if you're doing work for products, staff in a warehouse, this is incredibly useful. It's not just for social media. It's not just for streaming platforms or chat platforms. It's useful for all of front-end development. So this is a great skill to know in general. And one of the things that frustrate me about front-end YouTube is you don't see enough projects like this being told to be built by senior developers to junior developers. So I'm trying to change that trend and try and give you real good projects that actually will be useful if I was to hire you for my team. So this is what you need to demo. A small app where users choose a username. So you go onto a site, just a page, and they ask for a username. Then everyone sees who's online, typing, idle, in real time with actual timestamps. So you could have maybe say like multiple browsers open or multiple tabs open, and you could choose different usernames for each one. You can have it on different computers, and it will show different users are online, and that's all you need. And then when they go off, it switches off. Now this is why hiring managers care. It shows you understand real-time events, which is super important. It shows that you understand heartbeats and edge-safe data models. These are all concepts which are probably very new to you, and once you've heard them, go and research them as a part of this, and you will be so many miles ahead of every other junior developer out there. And it proves you have comfort with real-time databases like Supabase, optimistic UI that once you understand that term and you look out for it, it will completely blow your mind and how you think about UI, and you'll start noticing it in every popular app now more and more. And finally, LS. And it's also good to understand about, you know, RLS, things like row level security. So understanding how to, you know, secure an app, because you're streaming out data, how do you secure it? So these are all great concepts for you to learn. So this is the core checklist for your online presence indicator. We don't really want to focus on authentication for this. We just care about a user session being created and being tracked, and then when it finishes. That's all we want. So we want to have an authorless username, claim, or, you know, just a simple email sign, just something very basic for users to be able to just go in and start a session. That's it. We want, you know, several states. So you could have an online, idle, offline, or last seen state. So you could have 4 states here, and it's just, you know, true or false, really. So that could be something that you could add. Introduce sensible heartbeat. So basically it goes and checks the state every 20 to 30 seconds. So similar to a human heartbeat. You know, it keeps you alive. It's so many beats per minute. But, you know, keeping this app alive, checking to see the state, 20 to 30 seconds seems a lot more reasonable. Otherwise, you're just going to spiral out with your costs. And if you made this into a real app, so we don't need it to be like every second. Now, if it doesn't detect any activity, we can just auto offline. So if a heartbeat is missed, for example, no one is on, you give it about 45 to 60 seconds, and then you just say, you can go offline. And basically just shuts all, the stuff down until someone starts a session again, and then it just kicks it all up again. You also want typing indicators. So when someone starts typing, it has that there's 3 dots usually that shows that someone is typing, whether it's WhatsApp or some messaging service. And you want the same for this because it's probably going to get you into debouncing and understanding how people type on keyboards and when you should save information, when you should send information. And in this sense, it's about indicating to other people that someone's typing. So you could have like a chat where people can, add stuff to, which is easy enough to do. You could tie it to Supabase, and then you could even sort activity by, listing it and sorting it by recent activity. This is all stuff that can be done on Supabase very easily because it naturally adds timestamps. So you could use the timestamps by default on Supabase. Now, any of this is very easy to do by just taking every single one of these bits and just putting it into Google and researching it. But the most time efficient way to do it is use AI to help you tell you where all the separate things are for this to be able to do it. So if you're not sure on how to create an Authorless username, ask AI to help you basically understand the way to do it. Because if you ask AI to just spit out the code, well, you're not going to learn. But if you ask it to help you go to the documentation, which tells you or give you the key concepts on how it works, this is how you're really going to learn. And to be honest, this is how AI should be used going forward for a junior when you're in your learning phase of the first 2 years. Now, there's 2 main bits of schema that we need to add. And again, this is kind of like some back-end concepts, but these are things that you should be learning about. What is a database schema? How does Supabase, store tables, and how does it create automatic schemas for you? Well, these are the 2 things that you're going to need. You're going to need a profiles table, which is going to have all this information in these rows. So ID, UID, username, avatar URL, created app, and then you're going to have your presence as well, which basically stores status, ID, last seen, timestamps, and whether a username is typing. So it's got it here as a bool, which basically means it's true or false. Are they typing? Are they not? Very simple. Let's drag this down a bit. Now you can subscribe to. Now there's multiple ways to do real-time subscriptions. One of the ways is you could use Supabase Real-Time to basically just have this real-time data stream, and you essentially just subscribe to it and you get all this information from the schema available to you on your app. And then what you want to do is just essentially update your local cache using something like React Query, and then just insert, update, delete where appropriate. You could then even use server actions to ping the presence and write the status as it happens in real time. And very importantly, especially with systems like this, you want to have idle detection. You want to have auto offline. So if there's no key mouse for X amount of seconds, set the status to idle. And eventually these are all things that are going to save you data, save you money, server costs for your company or for your own apps if you want to make an app in the future. And this is why projects like this are valuable to a hiring manager, because if a junior comes in and doesn't know this, they have to learn all this from making mistakes, costing the company money. But if you've done this in a project like this, you're so much more valuable. Now, things you could do in the future to make this better is you could add rooms, channels, DMs. You could add that. You could have that. Last activity badges. So for example, active 2 minutes ago, something like that. And then you could have device scoped sessions. So you could say whether on the web or they're on a mobile phone. And then you could add avatars. So there's a whole bunch of stuff you can add to this. It's such a great project to do. And it just looks really beautiful as well. Like some of these just look really, really great. It doesn't have to be super complicated. You could probably somewhat copy the Discord style, which is generally one of the better ones. But there's just so many different great versions out there. And you could make it your own. But let's move on to the analytical dashboard. So this is the Frontend Now YouTube channel, which obviously you're on right now. But if we go to the most popular video, it's actually this Next.js dashboard video. It's a multi-video part series, but it's got hundreds of thousands of views. I think it's probably over 200,000 views collectively over all the videos, and it's incredibly popular. The last time some student used this on the course, they got a interview for 140,000 junior developer job for Speechify, which was just absolutely incredible. And the core idea is this: if you've ever used WordPress, so let's say we go to WordPress and we go to the WordPress dashboard, have a look at this. Very, very simple. It's got like a menu on the left, and you can actually minimize it so it's just icons. So maybe there's an image of it with just icons. So you can actually collapse it so it's just the icons. But otherwise it's the contents on the right, the menus on the left, very simple. On the top you've got a header for like, settings, adding new pages, quick short links, all kinds of good stuff. So just a very simple dashboard layout like this works great. And you could start off with a login page so you get access. So you then get access and go to this. You could do a simple email, password type of setup. And you essentially just have a preset password just for testing purposes. Get in, you get to the dashboard, and then you could have something like this. So instead of having, a dashboard with just this, you could display daily active users, feature clicks, conversion funnels, error rates, and most importantly, all of this in charts. So if we go to charts.js, this will give you an idea of some of the charts that you could create. So charts like this, and essentially you can have them stacked one after another, like on a top 3. If I go to the YouTube series, so that's kind of an expectation of what I'm talking about. So you've got analytics here, you've got information here, you've got the menu on the left. This is a dashboard. You've got some user information in the top right. And the reason why hiring managers are very interested in that is you can instrument, aggregate, and visualize data so easily here. And to be honest, a lot of the work that you do will probably be in dashboards. So here's some widgets that you could add. I'll put it into CodePen for you. So you could have distinct users by day. So that's something that you can have. How many users are using the site by day? How many have accessed it today? It could probably just be a randomly generated number for testing purposes for now, but the UI there would be very useful for hiring managers to see. You can have top events, so a bunch of bar charts at the top, and you could just have like the top events, so total profit, total customers, whatever, just random information. You could get ChatGPT to help you come up with ideas for what you could put in those sections. You can have something like a funnel, so you can see how many people have done signups, how many people have visited, how many people have completed profiles. It's totally up to you. You could also have it as a monetary thing. So just, how many sales of a product, you could do like an e-commerce one. How many people have bought a product? How many people have returned it? How many people have, rebought it? How many are returning visitors? So whatever format you choose for the data is up to you. But another really good one is actually putting in errors. So count, how many people, count how many errors have happened on the platform, how many issues have happened. Even if it's as simple as 30 days since last explosion, I don't know, whatever you want to put. And another good thing to think about is security. Is this a public demo? Is it behind authentication? Are you going to do some root guarding? So root guarding is something very important to know about in Next.js. It's something that I would spend some time learning on, especially as a junior developer. How do you protect pages that you don't want the average person to see unless they're authenticated, have access, etc. And you can use stuff like Supabase Auth, OAuth, whatever you want to use to give people access, Firebase Auth, whatever it is. So is it public? Is it private? Is it root guarded? These are all great considerations for you to think about. So this is a great project for you to make. And again, like I said, a lot of our students have had so much success putting this in their portfolio. And it's just, it's a very simple look, a simple menu on the left and just some data in the middle. It could only even just be one page, or you could have some other fake pages. None of this data has to be real. You could just create all this data, make it fake and just pump it in. It doesn't have to be connected to another database anywhere. And it's such a powerful project to have. Now, our third and final project, this is incredible for juniors. And this is a full authentication system. So production ready. And essentially what you'll need to demo is a real app shell with a sign up, email login, magic link, auth, could you use something like Google, GitHub, whatever it is, forgot, reset passwords. I mean, something like this, though. So if you go to the sign in page here on Frontend now, you can see that, you can sign into your student account, or you can sign up with Google. If you don't have an account, well, if they don't, you can sign up. If you've forgotten your password, there's a whole reset password. You can send a link. How do you handle all this stuff? What if you want to change your email? What if you want to edit your profile? All of this has to be handled with toast animations, confirmations to the user that something's changed, that something's happening, that an email's been sent. Like, what is going on during this whole process? You have to do form validation for your inputs. Do you have autocomplete? Do you not? And of course, protected routes, because I've logged out now. And if I try to go to the student dashboard, well, I wouldn't be allowed to go in because I need to log in. The reason why hiring managers care is because auth is probably one of the first things that you're probably going to tackle as a junior developer. Is also one of the first thing that breaks in a junior coder's code base. Being able to show complete flows and comprehension just absolutely screams that this person is hireable. If you've thought about all these problems beforehand and then going into something and identifying, okay, actually, maybe we should have this system in place. Maybe we should have this security thing in place. Or you're actually thinking in these terms before you even get your first junior developer job, you are very, very valuable, because a lot of times junior developers never, ever think of this stuff until they've gone through a lot of pain of having to get paid to do this stuff and get told off, they've done something wrong or whatever it is, and then figured it out. But if you do that whole process beforehand, again, these are things that make you very, very valuable. So this is the full authentication system feature list that you want. You obviously want a sign up page, email, password, OAuth, whether it's Google Auth. So very similar to this. This is kind of the setup that you want. Sign in, Google Auth, sign up, reset password, all that stuff. You want your login page, obviously. So email, password, magic link, forgot password. Very, very, very important. If someone forgets their password, you'll be very surprised how common that is, that they need to be able to go and change it, and that they're not lost in the process, that they know where they are and which stage, and they're not waiting for an email, it doesn't arrive, or they don't know whether they're meant to wait for an email. It can be a very, very confusing process, and you become much better as a developer once you actually figure this system out and build it for the first time. Change password. Again, you think of these things as very simple, but when you actually have to think of them for your own full authentication system, well, how are you going to achieve that? How are you going to change your password? You're going to have to change the password and affect it on Supabase Auth. Well, how are you going to do that? So these are all very interesting points. And then how do you let them know that their password has changed? Do you send them an email? Do they know that they're waiting for an email? Do they have to confirm it? Do they have to type in the password twice? They'll probably need a profile section. So avatar, display name, and their biography. So display page where they can probably go and change their name and all this stuff, and or at least see it all. They need to be able to, change their email as well. So how does that flow work? Is there reconfirmation in there? Do they get an email? That's a whole interesting system. You also need to protect pages, root guard with middleware. So you need to understand how middleware protects stuff, how root guarding works, how you protect actual pages on your site. Very, very important, especially if you're doing authentication, because you don't want someone to just type in a URL and have access to it, even though you've got an authentication system in place. Now, personally, to implement this, I would use Supabase Auth with Next.js. You could have file uploads with avatars to Supabase storage and signed URLs, or you could just use Google Auth, which automatically grabs their avatar profile for you, which is also quite nice to do. And then obviously you want to work on email templates that get sent out to users at different parts. You want to work on toast animations, so things that pop up. So toast animations being, so if we go to Shadow CN and we click, show toast, that's a toast animation just pops up, comes out of nowhere, and that's essentially it. So it'll say, oh yeah, you've successfully changed your password, or you've been emailed something, etc. That's what a toast animation is. Now, some of the stretch goals you could have, so something that you could add to it is two-factor authentication, device session management, login alerts, rate limiting on auth routes, so how many people can access a certain page at a time. Could you be hammered by security attacks? Profile management, audit logging. There's so many things that you could add to this, but I would probably suggest just keep it simple for now and just add these core features and just have it as that for now. And if you want to improve it as time goes on, you could even revisit it if you then decide you've got this job and then you want to improve this for when you go for the next one. That's also a possibility with everything you've learned. So how do you actually present all this information so it feels real to the recruiter, which, it is. You obviously start with a live demo, so about 30 to 45 seconds. You go through the project, you show them the UI, you talk through some key points. You're like, so I built this and I did this for that reason, but generally this is all it is, and this is everything that I built. I use this technology, that technology, etc. And then you could have some slides as well that briefly go over it. So 30 seconds per project. You could go over database tables. That's always very useful. Key routes, data flows, but obviously don't go into too much detail about that. They will ask you questions if they're interested. Don't take that time away from them to ask you questions. I'd also do a very quick code tour. So about 60 to 90 seconds. Focus only on the hardest pieces that were difficult for you to figure out. Don't just show them like the full code base. So for example, the presence heartbeat, that's a really interesting system. How did you decide on that? Why did you decide on that so many seconds? Reset password flow, that's obviously very interesting as well. Why did you choose that reset password flow that does this and goes here and does that and shows this UI? Very interesting stuff. And then you could, look at the deployment of it. So how does the whole deployment thing work? When you make a change on GitHub, it goes through Vercel, and then it goes and real-time deploys it for you. How does that all work? It'd be really good for them to understand that. How does that tie in with Supabase? How does Vercel and Supabase and Next.js work during the deployment phase? Very, very interesting stuff for hiring managers. So just to sum it up, these are the 3 projects. So online presence, UI, analytics dashboard, and a full authentication system. And these are the core features for each one. So the online presence system, real-time status and typing, heartbeats, idle detection, RLS secured updates for the rows and the databases, rooms and last seen timestamps for each session, your analytical dashboard, event ingestion APIs. Now, this isn't super important, and I'd probably say if we had to talk about importance, you could probably put that right down the bottom of the list. But essentially, I'd probably say what's better is mock data plus charts. So you mock your own data. So mocking means that you just create your own dummy data and then you can just put it into charts or use it for whatever you want. In this case, it's charts. And you would create mock analytical data and probably, time range filters, CSV export, and then just dashboard UI. I think that's just very simple as to what it is. And maybe a little login system for access. Probably something like that. And then a full authentication system. You want the email, password, zero auth, magic link, forgot reset, change password email, profile, edit, avatars, and then, just audit log and protected routes. So those are the core features for all 3 systems. I would absolutely build these and have these in your portfolio before you start applying for jobs. But even just having one of these will make a big, big difference to your appealability. So I hope that was useful. I hope that looking at these projects gave you an idea of what hiring managers are looking for. And really, we need to start moving away from, really basic apps that helped you learn how to code, finding their way into your portfolio. So no more calculator apps, no more clone apps, no more really basic projects. You need stuff that is actually useful and stuff that businesses actually need and are hiring for, which are these 3 projects here. So like and subscribe and follow for more valuable information like this on how to break into the junior developer market.